They have to give feedback, but it's not in turns. They have a lot of similarities because they are very good to practice writing. They promote learner autonomy. They are an informal means of assessment. They should be always private and confidential and interactive. These students' journal entries raise teachers' consciousness about those aspects of teaching and learning that are important to the students. Okay, another another instrument of alternative assessment are the interviews and questionnaires. Very similar because they have a set of questions and the students are expected to respond them. And why and when they are very structured and formal, and they are good for the beginning levels in the second language. It is good to use them very regular and in a systematic way, and always give feedback. You can use them before instruction, after instruction, and during instruction. Before instruction, in order to know which level the students are, you have to collect information about the students. Not only the knowledge, you can collect information about the background. After instruction, in order to know the effectiveness of the unit of the entire course, and during instruction. The organization of these interviews and questionnaire can be linear or not linear, can be open-ended. This open-ended take more time to the teachers to analyze, and they are subjective because they have a great deal of interpretation. They are very practical with a limited number of respondents, of students. There is if you develop that kind of open-ended, after having the response of the students, you will probably be able to elaborate, to develop multiple choice formats. And these multiple choice formats are easier, are faster, are easier to analyze, to score. You can score them quickly. They don't have interpretation, and they are useful for a large number of respondents, of students. But they take a lot of time when you have to prepare the items of these multiple choice formats. You can see the difference between questionnaires and interviews. Questionnaires, you need the students to be literated. You need to write and read in those questionnaires. You can make oral questionnaires that are very similar to interviews. You can do them for one person or for our groups. And interviews, they don't really, the respondents, they don't really need to write. You can record the interviews, but you probably will have to write all the transcript, all the interview. There is some guidelines for constructing questionnaires and interviews. When you write the items of these questionnaires, you probably will use a lot of time, and you have to think a lot to prepare them. You first have to identify the decisions you want to make using the information collected with these interviews and questionnaires. You will have to make a lot of draft questions, and you probably have to organize the questions according to some logical or meaningful order, because if you don't do this, you probably can make the students confused, and you have to prepare a lot of instructions. Devising questionnaire and interview items. You always have to devise to see if these items are good or not. The simpler the best, the simpler the better. Make items, sentences simple. Avoid items with several interpretations. Avoid irrelevant items. And don't two ideas per item. Only one idea per item. Otherwise, it will be confusing for the children, and you will get confused when you score it. And with interview items, you can probably start with the simple one, with the simple questions, and you probably can use the more difficult or personal in the middle of the interview to finish with easy to answer it items. Sometimes you probably have to change the interview because the response could be threatened or can feel uncomfortable with the questionnaire, with the interview. How can you respond to a student's writing? First, you can get a self-response. This is good for the learner autonomy that we are looking for in that kind of assessment. You can get the peer response feedback. This is the peer response is not good from the beginning of the course because the classmates have to be prepared, have to have some guidelines to give the response to the students. You can give some clues to the children to assess each other, some checklists with or some typical questions with the instructional objects that you want to assess. This kind of response need the teacher's encouragement. The last way of respond to a student writing is the teacher response. You can use face-to-face conversation. I think from my point of view they are the best because you can avoid the misunderstanding that could appear if they write the corrections to the students. You don't have the vocabulary and the expression you use shouldn't be praising or criticizing the students' work, and always use comments to encourage and stimulate the students. Limit the amount of writing from the student. There is another kind of alternative assessment that is called observation in the classroom. Two kinds: formal observation that researchers do when they access human skills and behaviors, and the informal observation that teachers practice like every day in the classroom. It's an integral part of everyday teaching. Teachers observe children and teachers observe themselves in order to correct and devise the instructional plan. The kinds of observation with the children, you can observe and you can make inference about the instructional or learning process or strategies that children take. This inference can be language learning outcomes, the way the students use the language, and can be the language learning and teaching process, the methodology and the process that the children develop to get the knowledge or to make the assessment. The observation in the class have to know how to organize observation. The teacher has to know how to organize observation in a systematic and manageable way. If you observe the classroom, you have to do it in a systematic way. You need a strategy, and you have to compare observation. You have to organize that kind of observation according to your instructional plan. And it is important that if there is some kind of discrepancy between the observation and the instructional plan, it could be provide an explanation for student achievement or behavior. Not only you have to observe of kind of factors, input factors, students' habits, the involvement, the patterns of error, strategies for communication, or unexpected events. And why and what to observe? To determine the progress, to identify difficulties, to assess new students' skills, to identify usefulness of the instructional plan, how to observe individual groups, and when to observe, when it's very important, but it has to be something routinely. You can observe as well outside the classroom, and you can observe as well in specific occasions. It's very important as well to record that observations, because those observations could be good, those recording to report student progress to other professionals and parents. This is good for monitor, evaluate, and redesign instructional plans. And you can use different kinds of recording methods. And this recording has to be systematic, complete, and explicit. You can do a daily record, a periodic record focused on the student, focused on the instruction, general observation, specific observation. Ways of recording these observations. Anecdotal records. You have to be frequent, and they have to be focused. You can write the things that you are observation. You are watching, and you can do them after lessons, units. You can combine them with other methods, and you can do it in file cards, in clipboards. You can put them in strategic locations in order to get them and to modify. Always date, put the date of each entry and describe briefly the context of the record of the note that you have taken. Checklist and rating scales. Those are another way of record the observations. Checklist, you have items, and with the instructional objectives that you have, and you have to tick if the children do whatever you are expecting the children to do. And rating scale, you have to grade or score the items you have about the things that you are expecting the children to do. Checking list and rating scales items are related to observable behavior, and they are related to more inferential aspects of learning and teaching. They are good for learning strategies, they are good for affective and personality styles, and they give the direction of the course. If you make a record of this observation, you have to prepare a report as well. The anecdotal records, they don't really require a special form. They are good for systemizing your observations, and you can make a report of individual students or from the group of the students in a particular lesson. And checklists and rating scales. You can prepare the report identifying what you want to observe. The items should be relatively observable. They have to be realistic, clear, concise, and meaningful. Try to avoid redundancy and use formats and use descriptors with rating scales, and revise always the items from the checklist and rating scales. Prepare the items of this kind of recording methods require a lot of time because you have to think deeply in order to avoid the redundancy and simple items. Techniques for testing. It's important to know that test items are the foundation of the test and the backbone of most assessment instruments. There is a lot of ways of classifications, that kind of items that are parts of the test. Can be selection items, can be supply items, and can be objective or subjective test items. Objective test items: multiple choice, true-false statements, and matching formats. They are objective because when you score them, you don't give subjectivity to the grade. The multiple choice questions are the most common, are normally more difficult to write than true-false statements, and the structure they have is a stem, a sentence. It could be a sentence, an image, a picture. It's not necessary to be something written. You have the choices, the responses, and one of these choice is the correct answer. They have to be very well written. If they do, they are very reliable because only one answer is possible. They are very useful at various educational levels. You don't really need that the test taker, the students, have the writing ability, so it's good for very low levels. And they are very quickly to score. They require time when they have to be prepared, but they are very quick if you have to score them. The problem is that the students don't write, so this kind of test don't assess the communication or language skills, and therefore they forgot to assess the higher order thinking skills, and they encourage guessing. Some children can try to guess the correct answer. Some kind of item violations can be if they are not grammatically inconsistent. You can write two correct answers in the choices. There are a lot of ways of giving some clue in the response to the students. Sometimes teachers forget to write an answer. Sometimes the distractors, the responses, are absurd distractors. So they don't really give the chance of really score the children. there are some tips for writing good multiple choice questions. For example, you have to avoid introducing a pattern placing correct answers. Try to make each item different and avoid extraneous clues. True-false format. This is another way of assessment in an auditive way. They are shorter than other types. The way of score is quickly and reliable, but they take time to prepare to make really good items in order to score the children's. But the problem is that they have a 50% guessing factor. In order to avoid this, put another category, not only true or false, write another one. You can make the students correct the false statements, and the more items you write, the more reliable the test can be. Tips for writing good true-false items include enough questions. As I said, the more items, the more reliable. You have to have in mind the background knowledge of the students. Avoid absoluteless clues like all, none, always, never, sometimes, and some, because students get lost. Matching format. This matching format is an extended form of multiple choice questions. You have two columns and you have to connect and match left hand column with right hand column. It's good because the students have more distractors per item. It's more difficult for students, so it's good for testing the abilities. Writing this kind of matching items are easier for teachers. Tips, you can have some tips for writing these matching items. Give more options than premises. It's good because it's more difficult for children, and it's good to assess the knowledge of the children. Make the options shorter than the premises. Don't separate the section or question. Try to give a blank space in order to avoid the lines between the columns. Try to put the numbers in the left-hand column and letters in the right-hand column in order to write the letter in the blank space between close to the number. Another kind of test items are subjective test items. For example, gap fill questions and cloze test. Gap fill questions, you have deleted some words, could be prepositions, articles, or conjunctions, or can be semantic groups. You can have a gap with nouns, adjectives, verbs, and adverbs. There is no systematic way of deleting these words. And cloze tests, they have a systematically way of deleting the words. Every 6 or 8 words you have one blank. These cloze tests are good for the reading comprehension. Tips for writing close gap fill items: ensure that answers are concise, provide enough context, blank should be of equal length to the solution, develop and allow for a list of acceptable responses, and don't put a gap in the first sentence of a paragraph or text. There is another kind of subjective test items. There are short answer completion items. The students have to learn and give an answer rather than recognize. Less guessing, and they are easy to construct, to build. They are good for check the understanding of a test, and they can test high order thinking skills, but they need more time to respond, and they need more time to score because the teacher have to read all the answers and they have to make the grade on the score. Sometimes they have a lot of subjectivity. This subjectivity gives the potential to be unreliable. There is some tips for writing short answer completion items, like that they have to be short and concise. They have to be written in order to get a short and concise answer. The teachers can have in mind that the same answer can be given in different ways. So they have to give partial credit for answers that have varying degrees of correctness. SI questions. The SI questions are good because students construct their own responses. They are useful for assessing higher order thinking skills, and they not only assess content knowledge, they test the writing ability. But the disadvantages are that they have time consuming and they are subjectivity score with a lot of reliability problems. The tips for writing essay questions are that you have to write all the questions in the similar level of difficulty, allow students enough space to answer the questions, be specific and be clear when you ask the question so that the children know the answer you want, and they assess only the content that is appropriate with this format. You have to know that which method are you using in order to make the questions. Testing. What is a test? A test, they consist a set of standard tasks that are attempted by a group of students in order to demonstrate their knowledge or ability. This test, you have to consider 3 things in order to devise the test, are the content, the method, and the measurement. Content, what the test is about. Method, which instrument, tool are you going to use to do the test. And the measurement is like the act of scoring the test. Are you going to take a frame of reference? What kind of frame? Norm referencing or domain referencing. Norm is from a group and domain is from a reference, is from an area of study. This is classifications of second language tests. They could be underlying linguistic competence. They